Alright everybody, I just thought it was about time I showed you some video of what I've been up to lately. Been very busy working, so I haven't had much time to play with YouTube video stuff. And I just thought I'd bring you up to speed. I've been playing with some old tube radio stuff. I kind of got hooked on the bug. I ended up in the second-hand store and bought a 1956 Telefunken Opus 6. Didn't have the foggiest idea what I was doing. They had a bunch of old console and tabletop radios there. I picked that one because I liked the look of it and because it had FM in it, which most of the old radios there didn't. Got it home, found out 8 out of the 9 tubes were missing, so got a total trial by fire on figuring that out. Thankfully, it was part of some old repairman's collection or something. One of the things they had there was this upright little shelving unit that was packed full of tubes that I also bought fairly reasonably. And I was able to find a bunch of the tubes I needed in there. It happened to have a tube cross-reference book in it, which was good because that Telefunken used all European numbering on its tubes, so I was able to cross-reference it to some American ones. And then the ones that I didn't get out of that collection, I had a friend that had an old Grundig that had some problems that he gave me, and I was able to steal some tubes out of that. So anyway, I'll shoot some video of that another time, but the Opus 6 is just phenomenal. But that's not really what this video is about. I went back because, well, I'm a glutton for punishment, and this radio that you've got in front of you now really had caught my eye. So this radio, I wouldn't know anything about it, except that inside of the radio, in an envelope, was this really amazing document. So this is just a basic description of this radio, written, as you can see, 8/1 of 1991, by a gentleman by the name of Joseph W. Willis, Jr. And what he goes on to tell in here is that this radio was hand-built by his father. He thought that it was about 1928. He couldn't remember exactly. But I'm going to read you, before we go into the radio, I just want to read you what this says. I mean, this is amazing. It says, built by my father, Joseph W. Willis, Sr., it was completed in time for the Jack Dempsey Gene Tuning Heavyweight Championship fight in the year, and then he's got 1928 with a question mark. That fight happened September of 1927. The radio is all handmade. I remember the night of the fight. My father placed the radio on the front porch, and people from all over the neighborhood stood in the street. It was a sight that I will never forget. I mean, that fight was just enormous. I'm not into boxing at all, but I've read about that fight. It was the first sporting event to ever exceed $2 million in gate fees. Mind you, 1927, the 100 and some odd thousand people that attended that fight paid, I think it was $2.38 million just to be in attendance. And then it was one of the first widely broadcast sporting events, and they said that the audience on the air was in the millions. So this radio was hand-built by this Joseph W. Willis Sr. sometime, and finished enough time in 1927 that they set it on the porch, and radios were rare enough the whole neighborhood showed up to listen to the fight. So this radio, what makes this so unbelievably awesome is he built this thing with a glass front. Like, I just could not resist myself buying this. So this is a strictly AM radio. I'm going to be honest with you, it's got some stuff in it that's scary enough with its age. I'm not sure I'm ever going to try to power this thing up. So we'll show you that. So the top of this sucker is hinged, which is just cooler than all get-outs. And you can see he has done what is the closest thing to electronic artwork that I think I've ever seen in my life. All exposed, uninsulated wiring, but carefully routed so that no two ever touch each other. Now, I haven't done anything with it since I got it. You can see somewhere since 1928 it's been adapted using a D-cell. That looks like that was about 1978 because the D-cell is just crusty, falling apart. I'm going to have to get that thing out of there. And then I can see we got a capacitor over here that's leaking. And there's a few other little weird things, like the backside of this voltmeter. The wires are disconnected, and I don't know if that's because somebody was working on it or if they vibrated loose, I get the feeling that this thing may have been transported in a vehicle or something and shook up, because a lot of, like this tuner is loose in the glass. That one's a little bit loose, and then these not bus bars, connector bars here are made out of glass, and this one is broke in the middle. That could be glued back together and function properly, but I've got to show this to some friends that are much more experienced in this ancient radio tech than what I am. But my gut tells me you probably shouldn't be trying to fire this thing up. That honestly, to do the electronic restoration on it, you know, to fix, for instance, the capacitor, that it really needs to be something to look at. As a matter of fact, there was some weird stuff, like this whole front glass was tipped in out of position when I got it, and then the entire guts in this thing is shifted to the right a bit. It's all sitting on a board, and I haven't quite figured out what's keeping it there, but it needs to be centered back up. You can see one of the support bars for the glass is visible here, not here, and when I study it, that's supposed to be shifted over to the left enough so that that's actually hidden behind this wooden sidebar. And then it's missing one of the switches. So you can see this is what it's got for switches, these wild old cam-operated switches. This one's missing the little screw that's the knob, and then this one's missing the entire peg. Now, just for the aesthetics of it, I can make that part in my lathe. I'll probably build a new one of those. But anyways, I can't even imagine how much time somebody had into building this, and then just how unbelievably beautiful it must have been when it was new. I mean, the bottom side of the lid still got, you know, the original varnish looking nice. The top of it's getting, you know, pretty faded and some scratches. But just, this had to have been a labor of love. And I did a little research on some of these tube numbers. Like, I can't remember the number offhand, but that tube came out in 1924. That's when that model was released. So the bits of research I've done, this really does look like it makes good sense that this could have very well been built in 1927, like this letter indicates. So anyways, if any of you out there know any more about these things than what I do, which is almost certain to be, I'd be quite curious if anybody's got any thoughts on this thing. And if any of you think I'm crazy for dragging it home when I have no good use for it. But right now I'm thinking about just getting some LED backlights and putting inside of there, and letting this sit in my office just for the sheer joy of looking at it. But anyway, that was it. I just thought I'd share that. It was just so cool, I could not leave it in that secondhand shop. And I'll shoot you guys some video and show you the Telefunken when I get some time, but my wife's busy up in the living room right now and I don't want to interrupt her, but we'll get video of that before too long.